Ice and cold has always been associated with stillness. Superficially, this makes sense, as when something is contained in ice, it no longer moves, and in colder temperatures, everything becomes frozen, so nothing moves. So sure, when things get cold, they stop moving, because they're frozen in ice. Cool, got it. But, obviously, we're nerds here, so we're not going to stop there, are we? This is Video Game Crosstalk, and I hope you enjoy this Destiny lore video. Okay, first things first. Quick disclaimer, this is not a legitimate science site or YouTube channel. I am a science nerd, I like to explore things, I like to explain things, but this is not a legitimate science site. Okay, moving on. First, a discussion regarding temperature. So, temperature is the measurement of heat within a substance. The Celsius scale is more or less based on the properties of water. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and boils at 100 degrees Celsius. And this is why Celsius is also sometimes referred to as centigrade. Centi meaning 100 and grade meaning measurements. So 100 measurements, 0 to 100, freezing to boiling. And of course the idea of freezing and boiling assumes that we're starting in the liquid phase to begin with. Meaning that if you start with ice, which would be water's solid phase, and the temperature increases to 0 degrees Celsius, it will then melt or go from solid to liquid. And likewise, if you start with water vapor, which would be over 100 degrees Celsius, and you drop the temperature down to 100 or below, it will then begin to condense, going from the vapor phase or the gaseous phase to the liquid. So really, we are adding or removing heat from a substance in order to determine which phase of matter it is currently in. Now, of course, temperature is the average amount of heat within a substance, meaning not all ice becomes liquid instantaneously once the ice reaches 0 degrees. Similarly, not all of your water instantaneously evaporates into steam when it begins to boil. Only the molecules that reach these thresholds then move on for the phase change. So it's more gradual. As the individual molecules reach these temperature thresholds, that's when the phase change begins. This is because there are temperature variations within the molecules or across the molecules within any substance at any given time. And the individual molecules that reach these thresholds, those are the ones that undergo the phase change. Thus, when you begin to boil water, air bubbles begin to generate at the bottom of your pan or pot and float to the top. It is those molecules that have achieved the threshold to change into gas and thus are released from the body of water. So, how does all this work? Okay, warning, incoming science more than we've already discussed before, so just stay with me for a moment. Much of this deals with what's called the ideal gas law. And in the ideal gas law, we have the equation PV equals nRT, which is pressure multiplied by volume is equal to N, we'll get into that a little bit, R, which is the universal gas constant, and temperature, where temperature is measured in Kelvin. In Kelvin, 0 is the coldest possible temperature that a substance can be, which was discovered to be negative 273.15 degrees Celsius. And this is the temperature where all motion stops. Say what now? Okay, so we're going to science this a little bit more. And we're going to start getting into what's called the kinetic theory of gases. And here we're going to start using the formula 1/2 mv squared equals 2/3 kBt, where we can rewrite it as T equals mv squared over 3 kb to get the temperature based on the velocity of a molecule. So this states that temperature is equal to the mass times the velocity squared divided by 3k sub b. And this is way more science than you really need to know, but just understand that these formulas exist and these are what their relationships are. Whew. Okay, back to gaming. For the purpose of this video, what does all this mean? After doing all the math and all the science, we have the numerical basis to calculate the velocity or speed of a molecule based on the temperature of a substance. Conversely, we can determine the temperature based on the velocity of the internal molecules. Thus, the temperature of a substance is connected to its internal motion. This means that the colder something is, the slower it moves. If you were to graph all this out across a variety of substances, they all intersect at a common point, which is roughly negative 273 degrees Celsius, which has become to be known as absolute zero, which is the basis for the Kelvin scale. Okay, back to stasis. The word and idea of stasis deals with stillness. When we use stasis in-game, everything becomes enveloped in ice. And obviously we stop moving because we're, well, enveloped in ice. So therefore, the linking concept here is that when things are affected by stasis, they are put into a state where all motion stops, which manifests physically as ice. So this is the basis on which stasis operates at. We are removing all heat, or as much heat as we possibly can within the power of our light, and reducing those things to absolute stillness. And because we remove so much heat to do this, this is why we become enveloped in ice, and why stasis in particular is associated with cold. Drawing a little deeper here, I did some internet searching on how matter would appear as we approach absolute zero. I was able to find my way to a discussion forum on ResearchGate, where physicists and other scientists, way smarter than me, were debating this. And here's what my tiny brain could distill. Visible light is energy that we can see. If a substance is not moving, it is no longer giving off energy. Therefore, we would see either one of two things. Absolute blackness, as black is the absence of light, which would make sense. If something is not giving off light, then we don't see it. But obviously we can still see objects because nothing is an absolute perfect black. So the closest thing that we could see, most likely, would be black. It would have a black appearance. Or, and this is a huge sci-fi leap, we would see nothing as not even black. It would be moving into the realm of invisibility. Again, my tiny little brain would assume, well, if there's ambient light elsewhere, then we would have to be able to see maybe the silhouette, being that other things around it would be giving off light, but the object itself that was at absolute zero would be giving off nothing, thus creating the silhouette. But we're dealing with space magic here, right? We're dealing with video games, we're dealing with a leap of fiction. So is there the possibility that when something is truly affected by a massive amount of what we refer to as stasis, would this be what happened to Asher Mir when he could no longer see the projectile fired at the pyramid ship? And that is all the time we have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like. If you would like to support this channel but can't think of anything to leave as a comment, leave the word Kelvin for the absolute temperature scale. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you would like to hear more lore explained in this fashion, and to keep up to date with my podcast, Video Game Crosstalk, the podcast of gamers talking tech science and whatever else comes to mind. Until then, I'll see you in the tower.